Well, good evening, everybody. As introduced, my name is Graham Flint, and I have the privilege to work with Sarah as the co-chair on the DAM campaign, the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition. I want to start just by saying, I wish we were in a room together. As Mike says, I long for the day where I could be looking into your faces, I could be chatting with you in breaks, I could be shaking your hand and congratulating you on turning out today and staying engaged with this issue. And unfortunately, we can't yet. So, please understand that I'm doing all that virtually in the best way that we can. I also want to tell you that, as mentioned in the video, I've been in your shoes. I can remember in 2003, 2004, when a proposal for what would have been Ontario's third largest limestone quarry by production volume was proposed literally in my backyard. And I can remember just kind of going, well, wait a minute, that's going to be crazy. There's no way that they can run an open pit mine in my backyard and it's not going to have an effect on me, and it's going to affect some things that are pretty serious. The groundwater I used to drink, the roads that I used to travel on. I can only imagine it's going to create dust and noise and all sorts of other issues. And I turned around looking for help, and there wasn't a lot. The system is really very broken in Ontario. It's very one-sided. That puts communities at a disadvantage, and only by coming together can you really make the difference. So it is so important. I thought Rory's call to action was tremendous. It is only by coming together and putting your voices together that you will drive this to the conclusion that it needs to be reached, that you push back and get this proposal off the table. The issues that Mark and Christina and Sam have all mentioned, before me today are real. I'm going to spend the next little bit of time and sort of take the conversation up to the highest level, and then I'm going to come back down to your situation and provide you a little bit of thoughts that I have that I hope you'll find helpful as you move forward in this final push. And I do want to emphasize something that Mike has said already, which is I can think in my 2 decades of history of more than one occasion when a local council came to the side of the community in the 11th hour. And they did that because the community just kept bringing up the issues, kept putting on the common sense concerns. One of the other things I want to say now before I jump up the provincial level is when an operator or an applicant buys a property of land and walks in and starts this process of getting zoning changed, aggregate licenses granted, they are land speculators. For some way in this process, it seems to get turned on its head. And it's almost as if they walk around feeling that they have a right to do this. They have a right to dig out of the gravel simply because they bought the land. And that simply isn't true. They have speculated. They have bought the land under the speculation that they can get the zoning changed, that they can get a license granted. And we need to remember that. They're the ones that are turning over the apple cart, disturbing the status quo. All the community is really asking to do is to preserve what is. And that's very important. All right, well, enough of that. If you can move forward in my slide deck for a moment. Unfortunately, the issues that you guys are facing aren't unique across Ontario. Every year, about another 20 to 25 communities goes through exactly what you've been going through for the last 2 years. It is out of control. There are almost, depending on how you cut the numbers, whether you include the pits and quarries that the province actually uses and runs themselves to support the 400 highways, the 400 series highways, the number of pits and quarries in Ontario can be as high as 6,000. But 5,000, 5,500, it's a huge number. And as Mike has said, that when a pit and a quarry is licensed, the province assigns it a maximum production total. This is the amount that you can pull out every year. And the total of that amount that you can pull out every year across all these 5,000 plus quarries in Ontario is 13 times more than we actually use each year. Think about that. It's not double, it's not triple, it's not 5 times or 10 times. It's 13 times the amount that we actually use this year. So we have way over licensed the land in Ontario to the gravel industry. That licensing that happens each year, if you look back over the last 3 decades, is on average is 5,000 acres of land each year are turned over to the control of the gravel industry. They're licensed to extract from there. That's a huge amount of land each year. Those of you may be familiar with the mega quarry in Ontario that was put forward up in the Shelburne, Melanchthon area. And that 5,000 acres is equivalent to two mega quarries every year. It is a huge amount of land. And then the last number that's on my slide here, 5,043, is 40 right now in Ontario. There is 43% more land that has been dug up and destroyed. So not just granted to the industry to as a license, but actually land that they have put the bulldozers on, started to destroy, disturbed the land, as it's called in the province, and from a regulatory perspective. There's 43% more land disturbed now than there was 2 decades ago. As Mark was saying, if you really did come in, extract the gravel, return the land to some other use, then that number shouldn't be growing by almost, let's round it up, 50%. It should be staying much more consistent, but it's growing. And all these numbers, all these huge numbers, this growth, this sort of continuing scarring across Ontario, you got to put it into context with how much gravel we're actually using in Ontario. That's remained flat. In fact, if you look over the last 2 decades, from the year 2000 to now, the amount of gravel we used in the first decade is higher than the amount of gravel we've used in the last decade. So the amount of gravel we're using in Ontario has actually gone down in the last 10 years, yet the scarring of the land in terms of the amount of licenses, the lands that are turned over under control, and the land that's actually dug up is going up. It doesn't make sense. And as I say, and as the speakers today have so excellently framed, it is not a benign activity. It destroys environments and it damages communities. Gravel feeds the very things that we need to be the most cautious about in dealing with climate change, which is an incredibly serious issue, that we've really got to come to grips with. And it's gravel that feeds it. Yes, we'll still need gravel to build smarter communities, but we'll need less gravel to build smarter communities. Sprawl is a consumer of copious amounts of gravel. And all this is being done, by the way, while we're trying to be good as settlers about the Indigenous communities, whose lands we are sharing with them. It ignores them. They're not involved in these decisions at all, which is a shame. And this has been said, but I'll say it again, the current policy in Ontario, starting at what's called the provincial policy level, the highest level planning document in Ontario, says that there is no need to show need for a new gravel mine. Let me just say that again. Right now, you don't have to demonstrate that there's a need to establish another gravel mine. And where does that get us? That gets us 13 times 5,000 acres and 43% more disturbed land. It is an absolutely ridiculous policy, and it sets the stage for exactly the problem that we're facing in Ontario. Next slide, please. So what do we need to do? What do we need to do? The solution that we're advocating for is this idea of a moratorium, a temporary pause on new gravel approvals. Given the facts that I've just said to you, that we're using less gravel than we have historically, but we're still scarring the landscape in an ever increasing manner, we can take a pause. And what we want to do during that pause is to bring people together. The aggregate policy really reflects thinking from the 1950s and 60s, where, as I said in my video, where the land was just ours for the taking. We didn't have to respect it. We didn't think about sustainability. We didn't think about permanence. It was there'd always be another plot of land that we could dig up or cut down or do what we wanted to it. We're hopefully more enlightened now, and we need to upgrade the policy to reflect that. We need to find a new path forward. And to be very clear, the coalition is saying this needs to be an independent panel. We don't want the government to go away and say, okay, we've studied the issue and this is what it is. We want a truly independent panel that conducts public hearings with all the visibility that type of process attracts, so that we can understand who's saying what and who's in the table. But more importantly, because we ask questions, okay, well, what is this more? What would this moratorium, this temporary pause, really cause to have happen? Well, it won't, hurt our current supply of gravel. If we've got 13 times the amount we need, we've got these dormant pits that are just in a state way underproducing what they've already been licensed to do. It's not going to reduce the amount of. It's not going to cause a shortage of gravel in Ontario. and it's not going to take away anyone's rights. The current people that are licensed to extract gravel could continue to do that. And it's not going to take away people's jobs. It's people who are earning a living, the good men and women that work in this industry that aren't doing anything wrong. They're just trying to, put food on their table and clothes on their kids. It's not going to hurt them. But what it will do is really give us a chance to sort of get these community issues, get these municipal issues. I really feel for municipalities, and I'll come back to this at the end, but they've been put in an absolutely unreasonable position on this issue, right? It's not fair how municipalities have been placed. And so we need this opportunity to revisit it and to really try to chart a new way forward. Next slide, please. So, translating some of what I've just said now into the situation that's being faced in your local community. I mean, the example about the over extraction and dormancy and over licensing and dormancy, is absolutely your poster child example. 7 pits and quarries clustered together. The applicants' own studies state that those pits and quarries are producing about 10% of what they're capable of producing. And now an 8th person wants to come in and take another 100 acres of agricultural land that have, source water protection, groundwater, significant features and characteristics to it, and destroy it as well. It just doesn't make any sense, right? Why would we, if we've got 7 pieces of land already being scarred, go back to Mark's comments from an agricultural perspective, why would we take another piece of agricultural land and destroy it for no reason? It doesn't make sense. It's not reasonable. It's all for the idea of individual profit and gain by the 8th person coming in to try and make money. It was interesting as we used the Wilmot example in a recent meeting with the ministry, and they said, yeah, well, that's, we want to keep a level playing field. Everyone gets a chance. Well, no, gravel mining is not a benign activity. The idea should not be that in our province of Ontario that we're going to maximize the amount of gravel mines across the province. That doesn't get us anywhere where we need to go in terms of the important issues. It makes a lot of people try to get out to make a buck, but it damages society, it damages the environment, and it wreaks havoc on climate change, which is already going to wreak havoc on us. It's not an answer by any way or means. The issues, people have brought up are just, they're fundamental, they're real, they're common sense. Until the recent changes, air quality wasn't even considered when it comes to an aggregate license. Luckily, you can talk about it in terms of the zoning, but it wasn't even considered as part of the aggregate license. Now, in some specific cases, they are saying that they want to look at air quality, and air quality is important to really think about. I think what Christina did was smart, because it's not just about dust on your car in the morning or having to wipe off the lawn chairs before you sit in them. It is this, ppm 2.5, the really small stuff that gets into your bloodstream, that's a determinant of your health, whether it be respiratory health or cardiac health, et cetera. It is a serious issue and it needs to be studied. And I think there are still questions. Like a lot of the studies that I've been told about in getting ready for this meeting tonight tells me that there's still questions on the table. That need to be better answered. And there are concerns that I don't think ever can be answered. Gravel mining is not benign. They can try to tell you until the dust must be mitigated on site. Standard policy associated with every gravel mine. Mitigated. Mitigated means making a bad thing less bad. Negated would mean making a bad thing go away. They're not going to negate the dust that comes from a gravel mine. They're going to mitigate it. There are fundamental issues associated with this. And so that brings me to this last comment about the role of the municipality and that kind of stuff, and why I feel sorry for them. I mean, first of all, they're in a situation now where every year they have less and less control. It used to be that municipalities would be very strict about ensuring whether a gravel operation could stay above the water table or go below the water table. That's been taken away from them. Some of them could pass bylaws to deal with things like noise and hours of operation and that. They've been told they can't do that anymore. Municipalities used to be able to, on the way in during the licensing process, cut what they called haul route agreements, which basically required the municipality to be compensated for the wear and tear and destruction that trucks take on local roadways. They've been told they can't do that anymore. Every time they turn around, they're getting more and more squeezed in terms of what they're being able to do. Yet they represent the community, they live in the community. They know what they're going to go through, that their community is going to be forced upon them. At the highest level, the aggregate policy in Ontario has these two branches to it. There's the license that the province controls and the zoning that the local municipality controls. And there's an interlock between the two. The province can't issue a license if the zoning isn't in place. So what I would implore your community to do is to make it clear to your municipal government that you want them to live up to their part of the deal on this, which is to protect them. Now, they're going to be concerned because, there's this thing called the Ontario Lands Tribunal, and there's an appeals process that the applicant has an opportunity to take it to invoke, which effectively takes the decision out of the hands of the municipality and gives it off to this hearing. But I think what my plea is to convince your municipality to keep these things separate. The decision about whether the municipality wants to support this land use, this proposal, this new gravel mine in your community, separate from what may happen in these other processes that go on subsequently. The municipality can make all the decisions that they want to about to what degree they want to support any no decision that they make. They could decide that they're going to, take a full-on fight and hire experts and legal people on that, and side by side with the community, charge through the whole hearing. They could decide that they can't do that for legitimate reasons. But the thing that they must do is to take that initial no decision. They need to look at the impact that this operation would have on this community. They need to look at the legitimate issues that the community is bringing up, and they need to exercise that interlock that says, no, we don't think this is good for our community. We don't think this is good for Wilmot to have this type of situation of this new land use. We've got 7 of them already. They're not operating. Why the heck do we need an 8th in terms of bringing in? So congratulations to everyone who showed up tonight. Great turnout tonight. Great speakers working on the right issues. We're going to be with you. The coalition only exists because of all these communities going through this pain. I spent 6 years with an organization called Gravel Watch Ontario, and I used to hate the intake calls, as I called them. When that phone first rang and someone says, "Oh, we were just told that someone wants to put a gravel mine in our backyard," I still remember my first call with Sam. And it was a painful phone call for me because I could tell the passion in her voice and how she didn't want this to happen to her community. But she knew she was up against a one-sided, lopsided situation, and it was going to be tough, and you're going to have to work hard. But you guys have done that. You've done so much in terms of bringing this issue to life and setting the stage to get the decision that you deserve, which is for your community to say, no, we don't want this in our backyards. So thank you. And thank you for letting me join you tonight.